Hello everyone and welcome to another Stately Office Hours. This is what we do weekly to discuss everything that we've been working on at Stately and with XState. We answer your questions. If you have any questions for us, you can ask us in our YouTube comments. You can ask us on Twitter at StatelyAI, or you can join us on our Discord. And our Discord is discord.gg/XState. And that's where you'll find the whole of the Stately and XState community, and folks sharing their ideas, discussing everything to do with state machines and state charts, and getting support as well. Although if you do have any specific support requests, we would ask that you go to the GitHub instead and submit an issue there or a discussion there. Just makes it easier for us to all keep track of what's going on. So we had a very busy week last week. We've had loads of wonderful feedback on the editor, and keep it coming, please. We're really enjoying it. One of the things that we wanted to share this week is quickly, because he's not here, and so I'll get to intros in a minute. Matt wrote a really fantastic blog post about how he models state charts from scratch, and you can get to that on our blog, which is stately.ai/blog. I'm not reading the entirety of that URL, and it will catch you out because it's got 2 L's in it, because Matt writes in British English, not American English. So modeling is with 2 L's and not 1. But if you go to our blog, you can find his post there. It's really fantastic, especially if you're starting out with state charts and you want to understand a little bit more about how to model from the beginning. I think it's a really valuable post. So intros, because I nearly forgot again, second week in a row. So we do this every week so you know who we are and why we are here. My name is Laura and I do developer and designer relations for Stately. David?
Hi, I'm David. I'm the founder of Stately, creator of XState, and I am in Atlanta right now visiting Gavin. So, yeah.
So Gavin, hi. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Gavin. I'm one of the backend engineers at Stately. Currently sharing a city with David.
And Farzad.
Hey everyone, I'm Farzad and I'm an engineer at Stately.
And we're both in Europe, where it is currently in the west of Europe, storming like nothing you've ever seen. So if you can hear the wind in the background, that is what's going on outside my window right now. It is goodness. A lot. Now, we have some folks joining in already asking, where's Matt? Matt's on holiday, a well-deserved holiday. I think you will agree, after all of his hard work and wonderful demos that he's been doing recently. So this week, I think it's useful to talk about David and Gavin, what you two have been up to. Oh, if we get David back, there we go.
Sorry,
what you two have been up to and discussing this week.
Yeah, so with Gavin, we have been talking a lot about server-side workflows with XState, mostly because this has become an emergent use case. People want to use XState, or rather they just want to use the notion of state machines and even state charts in the server side. And this makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. A lot of the workflows that people tend to do on the server side are actually state machines in disguise. If you look at all of these different workflow tools, from Zapier to N8N to just anything you could think of, including code first solutions like Dagster and Temporal, like these are all just state machines. You're doing things sequentially. You're doing step 1, step 2, step 3. But sometimes you need to express more complex logic. For example, if you're in step 2, you need to express a timeout. You need to express maybe a user initiated cancellation in which it might go to a different step. Or your flow might not just be a sequential flow. You might want to do things in parallel. You might want to have more granular control of the flow of states in your workflow. So this is where state machines and state charts really come into play. And so a lot of people have been asking, like, how can I use XState in the server side? And again, we've seen this as an emergent use case, and we've seen also lots of examples in the wild of people using XState for server-side workflows. And so that's why Gavin and I have been working on just making sort of a workflow engine and seeing how XState can be used for that, and how our Stately tools, including the editor and registry, can really play into what the future of visually created workflows looks like.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't have said it better myself. It's maintaining that first class citizenship with the editor and the visualizer as they exist now, and then just adding on what David lovingly calls the engine. My term for it was the great decider, but that was nixed pretty early on. Yeah, it's essentially just that. How do we execute state machines in the context of a backend or the cloud? And how do we democratize, access to it, in that we don't really have to worry about what backend you want to use, what vendor you want to use for executing these workloads at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's another important point that we talked a lot about. So we really want to be the front end, or like the React, if you want to call it that, just, putting on some hype to it. But like, we want to be the front end of workflows, just because the infrastructure, there's plenty of technologies already solving the infrastructure parts. Temporal has been in the news recently. Because they're now a unicorn, I guess, but which congratulations to them. But they're a company who's really focused on the infrastructure side of that. And so as far as authoring the workflows, there are currently a lot of solutions today, but they are limited. And one of the biggest purposes of XState is to express complexity, not to limit complexity, and not to reach out for another solution when things get too complex, but rather just to be able to orchestrate all of that complexity. And so, as Gavin said, we want you to be able to define workflows once, like either using XState or using like just this interface that XState likes. More on that later. And just run it anywhere. So if you want to run it on top of Azure Durable Functions or AWS Lambda, or even Cloudflare Durable Objects, or just so many other things, you should be able to just create your workflow, deploy it anywhere. And ideally, even in the editor, be able to deploy or create your workflow visually and press a little deploy button, get a URL, and just start sending events to your deployed workflow.
Yes,
Nice.
100%.
Something to add could be, just imagine how easy it would be to mock out the entire workflow and test it in the simulation mode in the editor without having to bring the entire infrastructure down to your local Docker image and then try to test everything at once. Yeah,
that's a really important point too that Gavin and I talked about, which is simulation. One of the biggest faults of workflows that I've seen, just recently, or not recently, but like for the past few years, is that they're extremely hard to test. Like even so, when I say workflows, I'm talking about workflows in the general sense. I mean, there's so many different use cases for workflows, but something that Gavin and I struggled with in Microsoft was Azure Pipelines, GitHub Actions. So just being able to test those. Here's how it works. You write like the CI/CD pipeline, you deploy it to you merge it, from a branch, and you just hope it works. Like you really have to test it in production, or maybe have some flags that say, hey, I'm just testing this workflow. Don't do this, don't do that.
Don't push here.
Yes. Exactly. So it's really risky, but what we really want to do is provide a way for people to simulate these workflows without actually executing side effects and things like that. Now, this is actually really hard to do if you're defining it purely in code, because code can contain side effects. Like you might accidentally program side effects into code. And so, with XState's model, side effects are really declarative. So you could just say, I know these things will execute once I get to this step of the workflow, and it's not actually going to execute in my testing environment. So it makes it really easy to mock and to simulate as well.
100%. It also addresses that issue of back to the Azure Pipelines GitHub Actions problem, right? It addresses the issue of, okay, well, even if there is a local deployment, sort of local dev test model, that means I have to pull down that external runtime on my machine, right? And at that point, if my workflow touches, one entity and goes into 6 different others, I now have to wrangle all of those essentially. And at the end of the day, if they're external services, I can trust those, right? I can trust that they will do what I need them to do. I really just want to make sure that my logic, my control flow is sound. So the stately workflows component of that is supposed to address it, as well as dealing with other concerns like version control. We found that, workflows, a lot of workflow engines out there are pretty rigid in the way that you manage different versions. And so we're working to solve all those problems right now. Very fun problems that require a lot of thinking and a whole lot of calories to address.
Oh, yeah. There are so many fun problems to this. And another one, too, which is exactly the goal with using the stately tools for application logic, is using stately tools for workflow logic and communicating that with the rest of the team. Because if you show your project manager or whoever else just code, being like, hey, here's how my workflow works, they're going to stare at you and be like, I don't understand what's going on. Show them a flow chart or just directed graph, and they're going to be able to say, hey, okay, so it does this, then it does this, and if this happens, then it does this, or it does something different. And so we really want that visual components to be a part of how you author workflows and collaborate with them or with the rest of your team.
Fantastic. So we have Nick saying, would love to have a server state machine that could easily link up to my React front end.
That's already somewhat possible, right? Because imagine that you're using XJS for server rendering React. One thing that we have with XState is that the interpreter of XState can allow you to hydrate the state. And then it can carry on starting from that state and carry on and go on from there. So you can technically start your interpreter in the server, run a few side effects, fetch some data, put that in context, get the state reference, pass it as a props to your Next.js page, and then let the interpreter on the client side continue from there with the pre-populated context.
Yeah. And I think
it's worth a blog post.
Definitely. And I think that there is a really interesting use case there. And I've seen a few videos of this online that a lot of people in the front end had multi-step workflows where it's like step one, then the user clicks submit, and then you have step two. Like think of an insurance workflow or tax workflow. Reminding myself it's almost tax day, so I should really get on that. But anyway, sometimes you don't want that business logic on the front end. In fact, a lot of the times you don't. So instead, just like Farzad was saying, you throw the event to the server, have the server report to you, okay, here's the next state, render that on the front end. And so having that be as easy to create as front end state machines would be really, really, really useful.
Yeah, Laura, I think this is going to be my next blog post next Monday. Writing XJS and hydrate the state of the, making it public.
That's a good way of holding yourself to account. Eric said, I've gotten so deep into XState that a function with more than 3 ifs makes me feel like I should be making a state machine. This is a popular opinion in the comments.
Yep. Absolutely. And I will say that because I've read a bunch of stuff online about this, that creating a state machine does not necessarily mean like going full XStates. Like obviously, we want you to use XStates, but if you could just progressively transition into using enums and then, maybe a switch case statement, just like at the very beginning, until you realize, okay, I actually need a lot more states and actions and guards and things like that, then that's an appropriate use case for XState. But yeah.
Some good news for Eric and people who like to build decision trees or refactor the current code to decision trees using XState is that we're thinking about adding choice nodes. So that would make it really, really easier for building these sort of decision trees with the state charts.
Yeah, in the editor, that is.
Yes, it's going to be an abstraction in the editor.
Yeah.
Very cool. Joseph Fitzhughes asks, hi, are there any open source web apps using XState and actor models and React? I'm building one now and would love to learn from some real world code. Do we know of any?
That's a real good question. I know they exist. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but I know that one of our big initiatives, at least, one of the biggest initiatives for the rest of the year is just creating all of these examples. I think we've been so deep into working on the blog, landing page, the editor and the visualizer and the registry, of course, that, we haven't had time to do that, but now's the time to do that. So we're going to be creating lots of examples and real world examples, not just, play examples.
In the meantime, Joseph, you can take a look at the open source code base of the new visualizer, which is somewhat resembling actor model. It's not proper actor model as in actors having inboxes and all that, not as fancy as that, but it's still a bunch of globally registered interpreters that are operating on top of the state charts that are talking to each other about sending messages. And we even incorporate DOM events and post message for talking to web workers, not web workers in this case, but like iframes and different documents. So it's going to be a good next step, at least till we have something official to present.
Mm-hmm. And we are going to be making improvements to XState core, making it a lot easier to work with actors, such as having the receptionist pattern, abstracting the retrieval of state from snapshots and things like that. So, yeah.
Fabulous. In the Discord, Binsby says, goal for XState, orchestrate complex workflows in a tool that XState likes, more on that later, and deploy them anywhere, create a workflow visually and deploy to a URL. The problem experience which exemplifies this solution, Azure pipelines and GitHub Actions, hard to test, hard to control side effects, really difficult to test and simulate. It's exactly what you were saying. Strong emphasis on visual workflows which facilitate collaboration with non-engineers. I think Vinsby is doing a great job of summarizing what we're talking about in the Discord.
I love it.
Yeah, we need to hire them as a copywriter or something. That's great.
Joseph again says, I found selling the idea of XState to my non-technical bosses was easy. Visualizations, yay. But selling the idea to my developers steeped in Redux, a lot harder. Do you have any recommendations that we could pass on to him for that?
Yeah, so this is something that I've actually been talking a lot, with Matt about. So we want XState to get to the point where it's not just tooling for authoring, state management and orchestration, but also a tool for inspecting state management, regardless of which library you're using. So we've had some experiments with just taking a Redux reducer and being able to analyze it and sort of derive a state machine from that. So you have a clearer view of like how this reducer is actually going to be used in your application, like what all the possible states and events are going to be, very much like a state machine. And also in the future, we're thinking about like just, so with the actor model, there's this idea of a behavior. And so a state machine is just one kind of behavior. So a behavior is something where it's like a reducer. It determines how an actor behaves when it receives an event. And an actor can have local states. So you have that idea of given a state in an event, the actor is going to have, it's going to change its local private states, and it might do some side effects as well. And so all of that can be expressed as a reducer. And if you're used to Redux, you're going to be extremely familiar with that. And so basically, the future XState tooling is just going to take that simple idea and just make it more accessible, especially if you're just wanting to write reducers and you don't want to buy into the full state machine thing yet, or maybe state machines don't directly apply to your use case. You're going to be able to just say, here's a reducer. I want it to work with the stately tools. And we're going to say, yeah, we could do that.
I think it was yesterday or the other day, I don't remember. But me and David were talking about being able to provide the exact same interfaces that other state management tools have with like the technique of nanostores, like Zustand, for example. And then you should be able to kind of make them more deterministic by letting them incorporate XState and the determinism of the state machines under the hood while keeping the interface exactly the same. So imagine having your Redux reducers, copy and pasting the exact same code, but now it operates on top of a state chart and it catches all the bugs and the flaky behavior for you. If that dream, we can pull it off, that will be just top notch.
Yeah.
Very cool. So this week we decided to ask folks a question that we actually started talking about a few weeks ago in office hours, and that was, which programming languages should XState support? Now, this is a big and controversial question, I guess, for a lot of people who everyone has their favorite languages. Everyone is biased to what they use already and what they prefer. But we thought it would be good to get an idea of what people are most interested in. In fact, I do think this was partly prompted by your discussion of .NET the other week, Gavin.
Yes.
And so without any further ado, I can give you the results of the poll, which we had in both Twitter and on Discord. And on Twitter, the votes were, we got a huge number of, we got just over 700 votes. So it was a lot. but Rust very much out there in front, and then kind of Go and .NET and Python all fairly similar number of people voting for that. And I think that this is very interesting. Well, what is interesting is we had a tweet from Ivan Tanev who said, "This is a popularity contest poll instead of which language provides the best baseline features to make state machines a natural fit." And Ivan himself thinks the answer to the latter is Go. But I think this really ties back into a point that Matthias was making a few weeks ago about some languages just aren't so natural for state machines as others.
Yeah, that's true. The results of the poll are really interesting, mostly because there are so many Rustaceans out there who I guess are eyeing XState, which is great. Like, where did you all come from? It's very interesting to see. So with Go, it's interesting because Go channels are sort of like, actor-esque. You have passing events like between channels and stuff. So it does make it more of a natural fit. But I think with Rust, one of the most promising things is that, you could compile that to WebAssembly, and now you could have XState running in, just many different targets.
And so we also had the poll on Discord, which had a far smaller sample size, but we did there again. Rust was most popular, followed by .NET as well. And we also asked for folks to suggest what languages they were interested in that weren't those, because really the poll is very much biased towards our pre-selected options, which were based on just what we'd heard around the community. And so we had a lot of votes for Ruby, a few for PHP, Dart with Flutter, recommended by a couple of people with Java, and then Zig, Elm, Deno, and Bash, all, in their varying forms, whether they're entirely languages or not. And so those all just have one vote each, but all interesting options.
Yeah, Bash would be super interesting. But the interesting thing with Ruby is that Ruby already has, it's called AASM. I don't know what that stands for. It's something state machine. So I'm trying to look
absolutely awesome state machines, probably.
Absolutely awesome state machines. I don't know.
Wow.
But anyway, it's Ruby state machine. So there is already a popular library and definitely interest for state machines in Ruby. This library has like 4,500 stars. But just bringing the idea of state charts, which extend state machines and make them do a lot more into Ruby, would definitely be interesting. And also Flutter. I've seen a lot of requests for, Dart and Flutter and bringing state machines to the Flutter ecosystem. If you're not familiar, Flutter is, I guess you could call it a framework for just building mobile apps. And a lot of people love it. So yeah, that'd be really cool to see.
Considering that mobile apps are, I'm hard pressed to find a mobile app that you can't model as a state machine. And Flutter, and specifically Dart's integration with Flutter, allows you to natively target iOS and Android apps without having to worry about, slapping an abstraction layer on top of it, like an interpreter on top of this JVM and all that good stuff. I would very much like to see what we could possibly do there with Dart and with the mobile app landscape. But I'm very biased as a former mobile app dev, so take that with a grain of salt.
So I think it's fair to say that you can keep pushing the languages that you prefer with us and let us know your use cases and why you would find them valuable and what you would use them for. I think that's all very useful information to us. Of course, it is quite hard for us to tell sometimes whether a language is very popular or there are a few individuals who keep telling us over and over again that that's what they want to see. But I guess both are effective methods.
Yes, keep doing it, because I won't stop with .NET. I'm just throwing that out there. I won't stop.
So
we have an insider.
Gavin, are you going to be the person who's going to implement the interpreter?
I'm breaking up, Farzad. Tunnel.
It's a big project. Yeah.
Did anyone else have anything else that they wanted to share about what they worked on this week, or anything else that came to mind?
Farzad, want to go?
Yeah. Well, We were working on, actually, I worked on the validation of different entities in the editor this week, and we had it merged. We just haven't deployed for the beta testers yet. So with that, we had validation before the beta release, but we took it out because we wanted to make it a little bit more sophisticated and kind of better aligned with the inline editing changes that we introduced right before the beta release. So now with that validation, you're going to see like warnings and badges here and there. We kind of try to lint and cache all the errors with the duplicate state nodes, duplicate events, missing guards, duplicate guards, and all sorts of stuff that could go wrong when you create your state charts in the editor. And it's absolutely beautiful, actually. Just wait for it to be deployed.
Yeah, the thing that I'm most excited about with this is that it transforms the editor into more than just a diagramming tool, because now it's something that actually helps you model your state charts. And we're going to be able to do things that you cannot even do in like just plain code, where it's basically like a helping guide. I almost wanted to say artificial intelligence, but we're not quite there yet. But just like a guide where it's like, hey, you know, this state could really be in here. And we could provide helpful hints and say, hey, this could be modeled better. Or here's even what other people are doing. You know, so yeah.
Yeah, soon we're going to be able to write linting plugins for the editor and the graph inside the editor, kind of like restricted as some of the ESLint presets are out there.
Yeah, and I sound like a broken record, but this is why I love state machines, because you could do things where with code, if you make like a logical error, like set a Boolean value wrong, there's going to be nothing that tells you that. But with state machines, you're able to analyze every possible thing that can happen and be like, hey, this is going to lead to an impossible state, or this state can never be reached, or, you know, just things like that. You have much more insight into the, full app logic.
Mm-hmm.
Angelo says in our Discord, really love Matt's blog posts, and I'm continually learning how to create more complex state charts. I've learned it's non-trivial to build working/correct complex charts. Any tips on taking writing state chart skills to the next level?
I would say practice, practice, practice. And it's also, the onus on us to create a lot more examples and blog posts, and also add some, important like features. I mentioned the receptionist pattern with actors, just adding those to XState. So yeah, honestly, just practice. Like you're going to realize which patterns fit best and which don't. But with state machines and state charts, at least you have tools for crafting your logic like in a good, robust way. And with plain reducers or whatever other code you're writing, you really don't have those safety rails. So yeah.
A good way of practicing would be to revise what was challenging throughout your career on the products you built and try to remodel that using state charts. Or another way of taking it to the next level would be try to embrace different alternatives. For example, write a feature using the actor model, write one of them using different interpreters, redo it with invoking machines, redo it with the nested states. Try to go with unconventional examples, for example. For instance, working on offline first applications and PWAs is going to be very, very easy using XState and state charts. Or even write a game.
Games are really great examples of using state machines to control app logic.
I wholeheartedly agree.
As well.
Yeah, right. I couldn't agree more. I think as the new guy here, picking up state charts and learning how to effectively think in terms of app logic, what I did was very similar to what I've been doing. Was very similar to what Farzad mentioned, which is I took a project that I'm already working on, one that's already underway, and tried to remodel it using a state chart. And I was wrong a lot in the beginning, so it took a lot of like revising. But after a while, you sort of like hit that sort of bell curve where you start to feel like, oh yeah, no, I'm starting to get the flow a little bit more. I'm starting to think natively in terms of state machines and state charts. And then after that happens, you'll know you're there because you'll look at every other system that exists on this planet and you'll start to model them as state machines internally. I can't enjoy sports now. So it is, it gets better if that helps any.
Yeah. I think that's worth a blog post, because state machines and state charts aren't just for greenfield code. Like you could take your existing code, model it on the side, like as a state machine, maybe use that for testing, or just use that as validation that your logic is working as you expect, and then slowly start to refactor. So it could be a good refactor target.
Yeah, state machines don't have to be the implementation of your program necessarily. They can be a way for you to validate if you're having the right thinking model. One other thing that I can add here is that if you're a React developer, for example, or you're very comfortable with another library and framework, try to get out of your comfort zone and build something with pure DOM, for example, and then remodel those actions and updating the DOM, or use jQuery in the side effects. Go crazy with all these things and try to mingle as much as you can.
Really challenge yourself. Joseph asks, can you go back to developing without using XState? Have you had to? I've been using it for 2 years, and I think it's something I'd have to bring to any new job.
So interesting story about this. We sort of like reverse dog fooded it here at Stately. At least like before I started Stately in the company, I was working on prototyping the editor just in mornings and nights and weekends, and just trying to do it. And I had all these changing ideas for it, but for whatever reason, I started with classes just because I wanted getters and methods, just because I wanted to quickly make things work together. And that soon ballooned to such complexity that I started using finite states within the classes, but honestly, like it just got to a really, really messy point, to the point where we know as a team that part of the code has to be refactored into a state chart sooner rather than later. So trust me, we know firsthand like what happens if you don't like properly model your states at the beginning. You get a bit of a mess in the app. So yeah, we're going to be working on that refactor soon. A lot of the editor does use XState and state charts, but there's like that one particular area that doesn't. And honestly, it's a really good learning experience for us. That was probably the part that made us tear our hair out, because it's like, hey, this is confusing. I know Farzad experienced that too, but yeah.
Every single day. I actually got rejected in one of the coding interviews just because I tried to use reducer in my React component, and it just failed. I was swearing in the middle of the interview saying I really need XState, but the interview didn't allow me to install any dependencies, and I just got rejected because of that. Yeah. One thing that people usually miss is that like one of the complaints that we get as a core team is that XState is a bloat on the bundle size, or XState is an overkill for most of the mainstream cases, right? But what people miss here is that when you work with XState and the state charts, and when you think about all these edge cases and you bring all the complexity to the front, you develop a skill in your thinking that you no longer miss the edge cases, and that's why you don't think XState is an overkill. Most people miss this point just because they don't see the complexity behind all these sorts of tricky problems that they're dealing with, just because they haven't developed that skill yet. I'm not saying it's not an overkill for some of the cases. It definitely is. It's not a silver bullet, but there is a point here.
Right, yeah. XState is a state orchestrator, not just purely a state management. Actually, that should be another blog post too. XState's a state orchestrator, not just state management. But yeah, for simple use cases, you don't need it, but it really shines when you get to complex use cases where you do want to know, like, what are all the states and events that can happen. And yeah, with any tool, there is a possibility to misuse it. I saw something recently on Twitter where XState was just used alongside a couple of other state machine libraries, and that's going to lead to spaghetti code no matter what you do and no matter how you organize it. So yeah, that's why we need to make better examples of like just how to properly model applications and use XState in a proper way.
I think at some point, David, we really need to make XState the compiler that can output to other state management tools out there.
Yeah, someone actually wrote a comment about that. Where is it? I can't find it. It was something about, oh yeah, here we go. Eric, can we export from the visual editor to vanilla.js with a bunch of Booleans and ifs? And so I don't know if Eric is joking or not, but it's actually something that Mateusz and I talked about, like just having XState be a compiler and say, okay, we have this state chart. Let's transform it to switch statements and if statements and stuff like that. That requires zero library code. First of all, this is definitely possible. Second of all, the more complex your logic gets, like if you have a big state machine and state chart driving your app, there's a good chance that, especially with version 5, that this is going to end up being more code than using like an XState interpreter. But it's definitely something that's super interesting that we do want to explore, because that would be cool. And we could say, yeah, XState, just contributes 0 kilobytes to your code because it just compiles it to if statements.
Okay, we have a new hire on Gavin's desk.
Yes. This is Naz. She's a front-end JavaScript developer.
She's great at Perl programming.
Yes.
Nice.
Perl.
If anyone has any other questions for us, you can always ask us in the YouTube comments. You can tweet us, or you can leave us a message in our Discord in the Office Hours channel. If you have not joined our Discord yet, it is where the community is happening. That's discord.gg/xstate. We had one more thing that we wanted to share with you that we mentioned briefly last week, but it's next week. So you got to remember that David is doing an episode of Learn with Jason talking about Stately and XState.
Woo!
So we've got to make sure you don't miss that. That will be on the 24th of February. And if you go to Jason's website, learnwithjason.dev, you'll be able to find the episode there, and you can, I think, subscribe to get reminded when it's coming up. So you can watch it live on Twitch.
Yeah, super excited about it. We're going to be using the Stately editor and making some fun examples.
Now, does anyone else have anything else for this week? I think we're all a bit tired. It's been a long one.
Yeah, I do want to mention a lot of people have been commenting that, they want the lines to be nicer in the editor. So just talking about what I'm working on in the editor as well is making the lines prettier. So I'll just leave that there. And yeah.
Boxes and arrows, very important.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, great. And so we will wrap up for this week. Thank you for everyone who showed up and asked questions and left comments. We really appreciate it. And we agree that Gavin is absolutely killing it and is a wonderful addition to the team. Thank you, Eric. And we will see you all again, same time next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.